Hello and welcome to the Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council 41st Annual Meeting. I'm Claire Rasmussen, serving as your host of the business meeting portion of today's event. And I would like to go over a few housekeeping items so that you may be aware of what to expect during this format. All attendees will be muted throughout the meeting to avoid background noises. Throughout the meeting, you can ask a question by typing your question into the Q&A box or by clicking the raise your hand button in the webinar controls. If you use the raise your hand feature, we will try to call on you to ask your question or to answer your question in return. If you are joining by phone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Our policy director, Jen McKay, will be monitoring and facilitating questions, and hopefully we can do our best to answer all the questions that may come forward for us. If you have technical difficulties in the course of the webinar, please call the office phone at 231-347-1181, and we will do our best to help resolve what the issue may be. So let's go ahead and get started with the business meeting of the 41st annual meeting. The first item to address on the agenda is approval of the 2019 annual meeting minutes. A motion has been made by Secretary Pam Rudy to accept the annual membership meeting minutes from July 16th, 2019. Hopefully, in the packet of materials provided ahead, you had the opportunity to review the minutes. And I will ask at this time, are there any questions or additions to the 2019 annual meeting minutes? If there are none, we are ready to put this motion to a vote. A motion was made by Secretary Pam Rudy to accept the annual membership meeting minutes from July 16th, 2019. Please vote yes or no at this time, or press dial *9 if by phone. We are in the process of tallying the votes. And the motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is adoption of bylaws changes. And this at first may seem overwhelming, but it's really very simple. And the main revision is to allow for virtual remote participation and communication for Board of Directors meetings, Board of Directors committee meetings, and Watershed Council membership meetings. I'm certain you can understand why this was an important addition due to current world events. Another change that was made is Section 10 on designated technical advisors. That section was removed as this is no longer in practice. And finally, the amendment process language was clarified, making it easier to follow with no substantive changes to the process. I move to adopt the amendments to the Watershed Council's bylaws, but I do want to pause to see if there are any questions or comments on these changes at this time. Again, you can use the raise your hand button or on the phone, dial *9. If there are no questions regarding this motion, we'll post it here for you that I move to adopt the amendments for the Watershed Council bylaws. Please vote yes or no at this time, or press *9 via phone. Results are being tallied. And the motion passes. Thank you very much. Our next item on the agenda is regarding our board of directors. And every year we need to elect new or second terms. But before we get into the specifics of the motion, I want to introduce your board of directors, those that are being proposed for a first term, those that are being proposed for a second term, and an individual being proposed for a third term. They're Dennis Rudy from Walloon Lake Association and Conservancy, Mike Supernault of Burt Lake Preservation Association, Jerry Huey for member at large from Sheboygan County, Chuck Kinese at large from Emmett County, Ken Pulikowski at large from Charlevoix County, and Jim Muth at large from Antrim County. Proposed for a second term, we have Bill Foster, Douglas Lake Improvement Association, Donna Stein at large from Emmett County, and Rick Dornbos from Three Lakes Association. And proposed for a one-year third term, Bob King on Elk-Skiggamong Lakes Association. I also wish to acknowledge our continuing board members who are in the midst of their terms: Linda Elke, Herm Boughton, Tom Darton, Larry Levengood, and Rick Brandi. And very importantly, we wish to recognize our retiring board members, and I'll go through who those are. We have Pam Rudy, who served 6 years representing Walloon Lake Association and Conservancy, and has been the board secretary and has had multiple committee participation. Charlie Gano served 6 years representing Burt Lake Preservation Association, and he has guided the board with his legal expertise, again in multiple committees. Sue Stewart served 6 years representing the Harbor Springs area. She guided the board on multiple issues and committees, including financial management and climate change. Jim McKimmey served 3 years representing the Elk Lake area and provided direction for the Development and Communications Committee throughout that time. And finally, I will be concluding my board service at this time. I served 7 years representing Charlevoix County at large.
And I did want to interrupt, this is Gail, to thank Claire for her service. She did serve for 7 years, 5 of those as president, I wanted to point out. She also chaired the executive committee, the board governance committee, the personnel committee, the long range planning committee, the ad hoc climate change committee, and has led this organization through several strategic planning initiatives. She's going to be sorely missed by this organization. Thank you, Claire, for everything you've done.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you also to all the other board members. What a great crew we have. I really appreciate all your efforts.
Okay, at this time, we have a motion to consider for new term and second term proposed board members. We'll post that here for you. And as that's coming up, you've seen some of the names have been proposed for new term and second term. Are there any other nominations from the membership? You can raise your hand in the Q&A box or press *9. If there are no other recommendations for nomination, you are ready to consider this motion. A motion was made to accept the following slate of board of directors with terms ending in July 2023. They are Dennis Rudy, Mike Supernault, Jerry Huey, Chuck Kinese, Ken Pulikowski, Jim Muth, Bill Foster, Donna Stein, and Rick Dornbos. Please vote yes or no at this time. Results are being tallied. And motion carries. Thank you very much. An additional motion has been made to accept Bob King for a one-year term ending in 2021. We'll see that up here in just a moment. Here we go. So please vote yes or no at this time on the motion to accept Bob King on for a one-year term ending 2021. Results being tallied. Motion carries. Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to introduce Gail Grunwald, our Executive Director for the Watershed Council, and she will be presenting some highlights from the annual report.
Good morning, everybody. It is an odd way to be greeting you all, no question about that. I'll wait for the screens to catch up. All right, I think I'll get started. We do have some screens in for you for the PowerPoint through the annual report, but I'm going to start by welcoming you all and letting you know how much I appreciate you participating in a virtual annual meeting. I think Claire did a fabulous job walking us through the business piece of this annual meeting, and you know, it really is complicated to put on a webinar that involves polling and voting and participation on some complicated changes related to bylaws, etc. So I'm just thrilled that we got through that so smoothly. I also just wanted to thank all of you for continuing to support the organization during these times. Our office has been closed since mid-March. There's some folks who come and go, including myself. We need to do mail. We need to do, you know, put the checks and the membership in our bank account and into our systems. And so there are folks who are coming in. The public is welcome to come to the office if they call ahead, and our work continues. We have field work that's underway. We have summer field staff that are happily out doing fabulous work for everybody. You may or may not see them on the waters. And so we are continuing to do our work. We're doing it remotely, but we're continuing to do our work. The other thing that I wanted to let you know as well is that the board of directors is working towards some long-range planning efforts and is very much interested in presenting the work of that committee next year at the annual meeting. And I think it will be a valuable tool. So I'm going to start with financial highlights. And these are in the annual report. The annual report is being mailed as we speak to those of you members. It's also going to be on the website, so you'll be able to look there. Included on the website is a list of all of our donors. That is not something that we print anymore in the annual report because it's such a wonderful large group of people. But that will be on the website along with the audit when that's completed and all the other financial things that you would be interested in seeing. These 2 pages that I'm going to share with you now are financial highlights that are in the annual report, shortened down. They're unaudited numbers. The audit is currently underway, but it will give you a really good sense of where the funding comes from for this organization's work and how we spend it. So over on the right-hand side, you'll see revenues and expenses. Our contributions were $479,000 last year, which is wonderful, from members and special contributions. Bequests are separated out. You'll see $90,275. So between the contributions and bequests, we were over $550,000. We do get about 669,000 last year in grants. A lot of those grants are large projects, pass-through dollars that go to contractors, road commissions, and others that are doing construction work, basically, for us to restore some of our perturbated streams, et cetera. You'll be hearing a bit about some of those from Jennifer Buchanan pretty soon. But those grant dollars really serve a fabulous purpose for us. It allows us to undertake some projects that membership dollars we can't afford to do. We do contract work, 31,000 in contract work, primarily for lake associations. And we use our endowment fund, $96,000 we used from our endowment funds to support our work. The other there has to do with some of our fundraising events, particularly for a total of $1,408,650 in revenue. Expenses we divide out into teams, our team approach, and that's how our staffing is divided as well. We have the Watershed Protection Team, Policy and Advocacy, Outreach and Education, Development, and Management in general. And you can see those numbers there. Watershed Protection by far is the largest expenditure, and that is mostly because of those larger projects that require subcontracts. And then Policy and Advocacy, Outreach and Education, and the other administrative teams much smaller, for a total of $1,354,534. So we did have an excess of revenue last year, which is great to see. We will be hoping that we will see a balanced budget in 2020. The COVID crisis has definitely put a pause on some of our state-funded projects and some of the things we needed to do in person that you can't do by social distancing. So there are a little bit of concerns about 2020, but because we had that excessive revenue in 2019, we're hoping that we will come out just fine in 2020. So the next slide is basically my thank you slide. I really want to emphasize how much your membership gifts mean to this organization. $457,540 just in membership gift last year, and that's just such a wonderful contribution to protecting our waters. We also received $111,756 in special project contributions, and $90,000 of which was a bequest. We had 147 new members and have a total of 2,150 member individuals, families, organizations, and businesses. Once again, how meaningful our private contributions are. It's a half of our total operating budget, so we really cannot do it without all of you. We also rely on 5 different endowment funds for our current and long-term funding, and our total market value at this point is about $2.5 million. Our goal that we set 3 years ago was by the end of 2020 to get to 3 million. So we are hoping to get there in the next 6 months, at least in 2021. We will be there for sure to generate the funds that we need for our long-term financial health. So now I'm going to give you some highlights of our actual program work. This is really truly highlights. These are a few of the dozens and dozens of projects that the staff and volunteers undertake. And I'm highlighting these just because they were final accomplishments, and also they really do illustrate the breadth of our work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 3 different categories. This one are basically safeguarding precious resources, which is actual action steps. Then we have water quality monitoring, policy, 2 different policy summaries, and outreach and education. So starting with safeguarding precious resources, we completed, and just so you can see here the diverse sort of programming, we completed engineering to bring new fishing access on the Sheboygan River. We coordinated ongoing efforts to explore engineering alternatives for the Lake Street Dam in Petoskey. We combated stormwater runoff through the installation of multiple rain gardens and a green roof. You'll hear much more about that from Jennifer Buchanan in a few minutes. We also collected hundreds of pounds of trash and recyclables with the help of 150 volunteers during our 15th annual Bear River cleanup. This year, the cleanup will be virtual, so to speak. People can sign up to clean up a variety of different waterways, so check out our website if you have a family team that would like to participate in those cleanups this year. And then we also coordinated multiple watershed action volunteer experience projects, including shoreline restoration and greenbelt planting on Birch Lake, invasive species education, greenbelt education, wetland education, and stormwater drain marking. So these things you see range from engineering to picking up trash to stormwater control, very diverse programming. So the next slide is about our water quality monitoring program, which is basically our oldest program. And we've been monitoring lakes and streams in our service area since the early 1980s. And we continue to look for long-term trends and problems. We use the water quality monitoring to make better decisions, to have public officials, lake residents become better stewards and make better decisions when they see trends that are impacting our water resources. So this is a mainstay of the Watershed Council's programs. So here's just a few highlights of our water quality monitoring. We informed residents and lake associations about invasive mussels on 20 different lakes. We monitored 20 lakes and 15 streams with the help of 67 volunteers through both our lake and stream monitoring programs. We monitored 12 different sites of stormwater discharge to help prevent pollutants. We also tracked bird fatalities from avian botulism and did that on 118 miles of Lake Michigan shoreline last year. We completed various research projects through our service area, and two of those that I would want to mention are the Lake Aquatic Plant Survey on Douglas Lake in Sheboygan County, and we also finalized a research program to assess the treatment of zebra and quagga mussels with a product called Zequinox. So those are two examples of our research projects that we did last year. We also coordinated the Michigan Swimmers Itch Partnership, and we tested surface water resources for PFAS compounds in Emmett and Charlevoix County, which that testing indicated that PFAS may not be a primary threat to our surface waters at this time. So that's some highlights of water quality monitoring. Moving on to advocating for our Michigan waters. There are a few highlights here. There are 2 pages actually for policy and advocacy. We have 2 members of that team, and they do 2 and about a quarter. They do an amazing job representing Northern Michigan on a variety of venues, including the state and federal government. So we were appointed, Jennifer McKay, by Governor Gretchen Whitmer to the Great Lakes Commission. We provided an environmental policy agenda for Governor Whitmer's first term, and that included advocating for an enforceable PFAS drinking water standard, among other things. And just today, there was a press release that came out from the state of Michigan publicizing the new PFAS drinking water standards. So we were very instrumental in seeing progress and having stricter standards related to PFAS. We also represent the Watershed Council in Washington, leading meetings with members of Michigan's congressional delegation to advocate for policy priorities for the Great Lakes. And included in that was promoting an Army Corps of Engineers plan to block Asian carp at what's referred to as the Brandon Road Lock and Dam. So we are working in Washington as well on some of these topics. We led the effort to pass a coordinated stormwater control ordinance for 3 cities in Lake Charlevoix. And we advocated for improving Michigan's drinking water standards to address PFAS, which I mentioned up above was one of the things that we worked hard with Governor Whitmer. So policy that impacts our local communities. We collected nearly 6,500 pounds of unwanted and unused medicines through the POD program, which has been underway for several years. And the total has been just remarkable how many unwanted medicines have been kept out of our waterways. We published the Pipeline Permitting in Michigan guidebook, which you can see on your screen, to help citizens engage in pipeline decisions. And we know that those are really timely decisions. We led the effort to treat Eurasian water milfoil in Crooked River by coordinating 6 local governments and 2 lake associations. And there's a move underway right now to have a Friends of the Crooked River built on that effort. We completed 3 social indicator surveys in the Elk River Chain of Lakes watershed. And we worked once again with Michigan's governor, Enbridge, and state, local, federal, and tribal governments to monitor Line 5 and provide recommendations for the path forward. That's just a smattering of the kinds of things we're doing in the policy and advocacy world. And then education and environmental stewardship. We had a very successful year in 2019. 2020 is a bit different with schools being closed in the spring, but our staff really made an effort to still reach out to students and teachers through social media and other ways. So that's really ongoing despite the pandemic. So here's a few highlights of education and environmental stewardship. We taught 120 middle school students through the Water Resource Education Program, and the schools there were Boyne City, Boyne Falls, East Jordan, and they joined in 2018-19, and we have additional schools in 2019 for 2019 and 2020. You see below there, Pellston and Mackinac City joined as well. We engaged students from 13 local high schools in our stream monitoring and education program, the Watershed Academy. We took over 300 6th and 7th graders out for the Students Experience Lake Charlevoix expedition, and that's out on a ferry boat on Lake Charlevoix. Very successful long-term partnership with the Lake Charlevoix Association. And we performed outreach and education at events like Earth Week Plus in Sheboygan, Bay Day, and Ravenhill Career Expo, among many other things. All right, so who's doing all this work? We've got 100 some odd volunteers that are instrumental in helping us accomplish all of this, but we also have a staff of 12 that I wanted to just show you. I love it at the annual meeting when everybody gets to stand up and introduce themselves and get to know all of you, but for now, you get a screenshot. So here's the administrative team. It's myself as executive director, Natalie Waltz, office manager, and Molly Voorhees, business manager. And Natalie and Molly are new faces to you. This is their first annual meeting. The next team is the Development, Communications, and Education team. Debbie Esposito is our Data and Membership Specialist, Jen DeMoss, Communications Director, Kate Sweikel, Communications Coordinator, and Eli Baker, Water Resources Education Coordinator. Next team, Watershed Protection. Jennifer Buchanan, Watershed Protection Director, Caroline Keeson, Monitoring Programs Coordinator, and Ashley Soltishek, Watershed Policy and Program Coordinator. And this is Ashley's first annual meeting with us as well. Next team is the Policy and Advocacy team, and these are veterans of the organization, 15-year veterans. Jennifer McKay, Policy Director, and Granetta Tomasi, Watershed Policy Director. So the summer staff and intern are always a delight to have on board. This year, unfortunately, we're just not able to have the fun that we usually have with our summer staff, but hopefully they're still having a good summer. We have back with us as summer staff members, Garrett Greer and Lizzie Michelson for the Watershed Protection team. They were both interns, Garrett last year and Lizzie the year before, and came back to join us as summer staff members. And then Hadley Haas is a policy and advocacy team intern. She's unfortunately doing most of it at home and hasn't had a real chance to get to know people, but hopefully in future years, all three of them will come back when we can have picnics in the park. So that's the staff. That is, like I said, highlights of our work. We're just thrilled to be able to continue to do our work. And once again, I wanted to thank you for the support that you've provided. And now we're going to swing back to Claire, and she's going to adjourn the annual meeting, the business portion of the annual meeting.
Thank you, Gail. And at this time, I do want to thank you, the members, for all of the support that you give us and for participating today with us. And at this time, I would like to move to adjourn the business portion of the meeting. There should be a method for, there we go. So a motion was made to adjourn the business portion of the meeting. Please vote yes or no at this time. Results are tabulating. And motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. So at this time, I am truly honored to introduce Jen Buchanan. Jennifer Buchanan is our featured speaker today, and she's the Watershed Protection Director for the Watershed Council, serving 11 years as an employee. Her current work includes, among many tasks, planning, coordination, and implementation of on-the-ground green stormwater infrastructure projects for municipalities and property owners, education of contractors and property owners about soft shoreline or bioengineering practices on lakes and streams to restore their natural ecosystem functions, and development and implementation of watershed management plans throughout the Watershed Council service area, and she secures fundings for those projects as well. The title of her presentation today is Rain Gardens, a green way to keep stormwater at bay, and she will be informing us about how rain gardens are a great way for homeowners to reduce the amount of stormwater pollutants that enter our waterways. Hello, Jen.
Hi, Claire. Thank you very much. And good morning to everybody else out there, and thank you for tuning in. My presentation today is Rain Gardens, a green way to keep stormwater at bay. I want to just start by a few other housekeeping items that we talked about at the beginning, just as reminders. At the end of the presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. As a reminder, during the presentation, you are welcome to ask questions using the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen, so you don't forget them. Staff will be reviewing the questions as they come in and will ask them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You will also have the opportunity to use the raise your hand function during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation to ask questions directly. We will do our best to answer all of your questions. Thank you. In this presentation, I will talk about stormwater, what it is and why it matters, and rain gardens, what they are, how they help manage stormwater and protect water quality, and what you might need to know about installing a rain garden on your property. I will also highlight some recent rain garden projects initiated by the Watershed Council, and we will also debut our new rain garden video prepared especially for today's annual meeting. Let's begin. First, let's talk about imperviousness. When we talk about imperviousness in the landscape, we are referring to the streets, houses, driveways, parking lots, and other areas where snowmelt and rain cannot soak into the ground below. As development increases, imperviousness increases, which means more and more of the landscape cannot absorb the local precipitation, and as a result, it runs off the landscape. This is known as stormwater runoff. The more impervious surfaces, therefore, the more runoff in both volume and rate. In other words, more water is moving across the landscape faster than it would in an undeveloped landscape. Consequently, as part of this process, water quality decreases. To illustrate the impact of imperviousness, this diagram shows how the local hydrologic cycle is changed under varying degrees of development. The upper left shows an undeveloped landscape with only natural ground cover and no impervious surfaces. 50% of rainfall and snowmelt soak into the ground, and only 10% flows across the landscape as runoff. The upper right scenario, with 10 to 20% imperviousness, shows a decrease in infiltration to 42% and an increase in runoff to 20%. The bottom left shows 30 to 50% imperviousness, and the infiltration rate has dropped further to 35%, and there is an increase in runoff to 30%. And finally, at 75 to 100% imperviousness, which is reflective of most urbanized areas, infiltration rates have dropped all the way to only 15%, with only 55% of precipitation now, with 55% of precipitation now as runoff. So there's more runoff moving faster across the landscape and along the ways where water quality degrades because stormwater is picking up pollutants from a wide variety of sources. And where does this runoff go? Not to a local wastewater treatment plant like household wastewater, but in most cities and towns, it goes into the city stormwater sewer. The left-hand image shows the typical scenario where a house in town has roof runoff draining to the street and enters into a curb inlet. From there, it travels through the piped storm sewer and discharges to a nearby water body untreated. A local example of this is the outfall shown at right. It is located at Ski. I will add, if you were to try to find this outfall today, you would have to look in the water as it is completely submerged at high lake levels. Our collective landscapes are laden with pollutants, from everyday trash to sediments from erosion, oils and heavy metals associated with leaking vehicles, fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides from landscape practices, and bacteria and pathogens from animal waste. Even lawn clippings, although organic, are a source of nutrient pollution. A lesser known but equally impactful source of pollution is thermal pollution. As stormwater runs across impervious surfaces, it warms under the direct exposure to sunlight. When discharged to nearby lakes and streams, the increased water temperature warms the receiving water body and can impact cold water requiring fish and other aquatic organisms, as well as deplete oxygen. If we all look a little closer at our home environments, it might surprise you at how much impervious surfaces we all have in our lives. For example, here's your average home, complete with a fairly modest 1,200 square foot roof, sidewalk, and driveway. All of the surfaces drain to the street along with the pollutants associated with them. For perspective, in case you cannot imagine that this amounts to much stormwater, 1 inch of rain falling in a 24-hour period on a 1,200 square foot roof will generate 700 gallons of runoff. So it's important that we all consider what we can do to counter the runoff generated from these surfaces at our residences. Using a variety of green infrastructure techniques is a great way for not only homeowners, but municipalities, businesses, educational institutions, and others to counter the impacts of imperviousness, to reduce stormwater runoff and protect water quality. From rain gardens shown at the upper left, to grass pavers, rain barrels, tree box filters, permeable pavers, green roofs, disconnecting downspouts, and simple but hugely effective street trees, the options are many and the environmental benefits are vast. Simply put, green infrastructure captures the rain where it falls. It mimics natural hydrologic processes and uses natural elements such as soil and plants to turn rainfall into a resource instead of waste. One way to think of green infrastructure is that it strives to manage stormwater by slowing it down, spreading it out, and soaking it in. Perhaps the most widely known green infrastructure technique, rain gardens are both beautiful and functional. Rain gardens are designed to receive runoff from nearby impervious surfaces. These shallow, depressed landscape areas then hold the runoff temporarily before the underlying soils infiltrate the runoff and the plants take up the water and nutrients they need from the stormwater. Water continues to move downward through the soils, and pollutants are removed by both physical and biological processes, eventually replenishing the groundwater below. Benefits of rain gardens are many. First and foremost, rain gardens help reduce stormwater runoff, thereby protecting the local surface waters that would otherwise receive the polluted runoff. They aid in groundwater recharge, reduce the degree of soil erosion on receiving water bodies, and help reduce the risk of localized flooding. The plantings also help to support wildlife while providing beauty to the landscape. If a rain garden sounds like something you might want to add to your landscape, let's first talk a bit about things you should know. Determining the right location for your rain garden is key. The best locations are near the impervious surfaces that will be draining to your rain garden. However, you do not want to locate your rain garden within 10 feet of your house or any structure with a basement or crawl space. You also should not locate your rain garden over top of your septic tank, drain field, wellhead, or any utilities. Be sure the water table is at least 2 feet below the bottom of the rain garden. It is important to locate your rain garden where the soils have good drainage. If you aren't sure, you can dig a hole about 18 inches deep, then fill the hole once and allow it to drain fully. Fill the hole again and make sure it drains completely within 24 hours. If it does not, choose another site or plan to amend the soils underneath the rain garden so that proper drainage is achievable. A properly functioning rain garden will not hold water for more than 24 to 48 hours at the most. It is also best to avoid locating your rain garden areas where there are a lot of trees to avoid disturbing tree roots. Avoid steep slopes greater than 12% as well. The size of your rain garden will depend on the area of impervious surface you will be directing runoff from. Although there are many different formulas and rain garden calculators available online to determine the size of a rain garden, this slide provides a general rule of thumb for sizing a rain garden. As this illustration shows, 500 square feet of roof, 300 square feet of driveway, and 100 square feet of sidewalk will be directed to the planned rain garden for a total of 900 square feet. Divide 900 by 6, the anticipated depth of the rain garden in inches, and that gives you 150 square feet. So this homeowner will need to have about 150 square feet of rain garden to adequately capture and treat runoff from 900 square feet of impervious surfaces. There are a few key steps to installing a rain garden. After you've determined the best location for your rain garden, define the shape and begin to remove any interior vegetation within the outline. For larger areas, a sod cutter is a good way to eliminate swaths of grass. Next, you will need to over-excavate the area. In other words, you will need to dig approximately 12 inches deeper than the anticipated bottom of the rain garden. This step is especially important where underlying soils are not well draining. The removed soil should be stockpiled, as a portion of them will be added back into the base of the rain garden. If your rain garden is on a slope, you can use some of the excavated soils to form a berm downslope to help hold runoff in the rain garden. Next, you will backfill the excavated rain garden basin with some, but not all, of the excavated soils. Before backfilling, mix a portion of the material with a mixture of sand and compost. Ultimately, the soil mixture should be about 50% sand, 30% compost, and 25% topsoil by volume. This combination will allow for good drainage while providing enough organic material for plant growth and moisture retention. Backfill the soil mixture to within 3 to 12 inches of the surrounding grade. For smaller rain gardens, more depth may be necessary to hold the receiving volume of runoff. In some instances, reinforcing the stormwater entry points with small cobble is prudent to prevent erosion. This is especially important if the rain garden is receiving runoff from a direct source, such as a downspout or pipe. Next comes laying out the plants. Plant selection is key. Not all areas of the rain garden will be consistently wet, so it is important to think about which plants will thrive in the lower portions of the rain garden where conditions may be wetter as opposed to the drier side slopes. Be sure to space the plants according to their growth habit. After the plants have been positioned and planted, be sure to mulch with about 2 inches of double shredded hardwood mulch and water thoroughly for the first few weeks. Even if wet weather follows after planting, like all gardens, keeping the plants well watered will help them to become established. Yes, even rain gardens need watering, at least in the beginning. As for what plants are best for rain gardens, well, native ones, of course. There are many benefits to using native plants. First and foremost, they are best adapted to the regional climate and other conditions that are unique to the given area. Therefore, they tend to thrive without much maintenance. In particular, deep-rooting native plant species tend to be the best choices because their deep roots form complex channels in the soil that help direct drainage down into the soils. The network of roots also provide lots of surface area for plants to take up nutrients in the stormwater. And of course, native plants provide essential habitat for pollinators and other wildlife, which is oftentimes in short supply in more traditional landscapes. Now I would like to briefly feature some of the local rain garden projects coordinated by the Watershed Council in the last few years. If you are in the Petoskey area, be sure to look for signs like the one shown on the left-hand side. They denote one of the 11 residential rain gardens installed as part of Project Rain Garden, which was funded through the Petoskey Harbor Springs Area Community Foundation. In 2011, the Watershed Council was awarded a grant from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative to implement the Little Traverse Bay Watershed Stormwater Management Initiative project, which included constructing residential and community rain gardens in the seasonal community of Bayview Association. Of the 4 community rain gardens, perhaps the most ambitious is the one that runs parallel with Park Avenue, opposite the library, which is featured on this slide. As part of the construction of the rain garden, a new curb was poured between the sidewalk and roadway. Openings or curb cuts were incorporated to allow flow from the street to enter into the rain garden. A wide variety of perennials and grasses were planted to be sure the rain garden is visually appealing throughout the summer when Bayview is occupied. This slide shows the rain garden under construction and in action. At left, contractors install a cobble-lined swale through the center of the rain garden to help direct runoff along its length. At right, runoff can be seen entering through one of the curb cuts during a heavy rain. Some more images of the Bayview rain gardens highlight some of the more popular blooming perennials like purple coneflower, black-eyed Susans, nodding wild onion, as well as little blue stem grass. Notice the cobble entry point in the photo at the bottom, which is essential at this location off of Encampment Avenue, because heavy runoff enters the rain garden with significant velocity and would otherwise erode the area. Here's another rain garden in Bayview near the tennis courts. With Little Traverse Bay in the background, this rain garden brings great appeal to an area that was previously a browned out turf zone. I especially love the signs that a resident of Bayview Association lovingly made for each of the community rain gardens. Project Rain Garden, which included the construction of 11 residential rain gardens within Petoskey, features some very unique rain gardens, including the one featured here on a fairly steep setting. Due to the slope, a series of terraced rain gardens was constructed, each one connected to the next. To date, even the heaviest of rainfalls has been captured by this series of rain gardens. Look for this rain garden featured in our video. This rain garden, also part of Project Rain Garden, is built within a narrow area alongside the property owner's driveway. A downspout from the roof is directed into the rain garden. Prior to the rain garden, the area was an exposed, eroding, and unsightly area that was desperate for beautification. This sign stands at the Petoskey Greenway Rain Garden at the St. Francis Credit Union, which will be featured in our upcoming video. Also part of Project Rain Garden, along with support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, this rain garden is a great example of a community partnership. It is our hope that rain gardens become more of a practice, not only with homeowners, but with municipalities, businesses, and others who can help spread the word about the benefits of green infrastructure and also showcase the beauty of rain gardens. If you'd like to know more about rain gardens, please be sure to check out the resources available through the Watershed Council. The 3 featured here all highlight green infrastructure techniques. You may find them on our website, or feel free to email or call our office to request copies. So that's the end of my presentation, and at this point we will answer questions you may have. Again, you can submit questions through the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen, or you may use the raise your hand function. If joining by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Policy Director Jennifer McKay will facilitate the Q&A portion. Jennifer, can you let us know if we've had any questions so far?
Yes, thank you, Jen. That was wonderful. And we do have some questions for you that have come in. So the first question is, are there any local vendors where we can buy native plants that would be good for rain gardens?
A couple sources. You can always ask a local nursery, specifically ask them what native plants they may have on hand or what they may be able to order from a native plant supplier. The most local direct source of native plants is the Otsego Conservation District in Gaylord. They have a small native plant nursery, and we've received a lot of native plants from them over the years for our projects. So I would say they're the closest direct source, but always please ask your local nurseries whether or not they carry or could obtain native plants for you.
Great. And on a similar note, do you have any suggestions of plants that strive in rain gardens in our area?
There are a lot of great native plants and we'll feature a few of them in our upcoming video. Plants that tend to do really well are things like Joe Pye weed and a couple of the different milkweeds that are better suited to wet conditions. Culver's root, and again, drier conditions, some of the coneflowers that are featured. And in those publications that I showed on that last slide, there's a short list of great plants that do well in rain gardens that you can reference as well.
Cool. So there are two questions related to funding. Is there any funding available for those who want to install a rain garden, or any type of opportunities for funding to help individuals pay for rain gardens?
At this point in time, we do not have any funding available. Project Rain Garden was very helpful. Again, that was through our local community foundation, and that offered assistance with rain gardens through a cost share program. That program is now over, but you know, in the future, because it's such a value and incentive for property owners to install rain gardens, if they have a little financial help, that's something that we would certainly consider. But at this time right now, that we unfortunately don't have any funding.
Thank you. So if an individual wanted to install a rain garden at their home, is the Watershed Council available to help? Would they come out to the house to see if it is feasible?
Yes, particularly if it's, you know, of course, if in our service area, but if it's something that you want to have a second set of eyes on, the Watershed Council can come out and take a look and be hopefully helpful and advise whether it's a good location and what the other things they may want to consider.
Great, thank you. Are rain gardens good for areas with standing water?
Generally speaking, if there's standing water, that means there's poor drainage, whether it's because it's just inundated with a lot of surface water draining to it, or because the underlying soils aren't well draining. So as I referenced, I think in my presentation, if it's not well draining, you'll need to do a lot of work to amend the soils to get good drainage. So generally speaking, areas with standing water are not ideal, but it kind of needs to be assessed on a site-by-site basis.
Thank you. On a similar note, are there locations in which a rain garden would not work or grow well? Does it have to have a lot of water to be successful?
It doesn't have to have a lot of water draining to it to be successful. So you would just want to assess how much area you are actually draining to it, and that would determine the size. But a rain garden, you know, again, is basically a regular garden, but depressed and bowl shaped. So, and again, we kind of discourage from locating them in areas where there's a lot of overhead trees and things like that that would interfere with roots.
Great, thanks. Do rain gardens ever get clogged with sediment or leaves?
Yes, they do. That's a good question. I did not include in my presentation. So depending on the source of stormwater drain draining to the rain garden, it may have a lot of sediment in it. And so a lot of times we use those cobble entry points to collect a lot of that sediment so that it doesn't make its way all the way into the rain garden. So basically, depending on how clean or sediment-free your the area that's draining to it, you know, you have to kind of do ongoing maintenance, and yes, leafy matter and things like that on a at least annual basis or more frequently than that to keep it functioning properly.
Perfect. Two similar questions have come in. Are there additional rain gardens in the area that we could look at outside of those that are in Bayview? And additionally, are there rain garden examples outside of Petoskey and the Little Traverse Bay area?
Yeah, the Watershed Council, our first rain garden project was in partnership with the City of Charlevoix Library. And so that was installed probably about 10 years ago or more at this point. So that's a great example of a rain garden. It drains a large area of their parking lot. So that would be a great example of a rain garden to visit if you're in the Charlevoix area. They also have some other smaller rain gardens in the area that they've undertaken as part of their, you know, city improvement projects.
Wonderful. Just a reminder for everyone, if you have questions, please use the Q&A chat box at the bottom, or feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you so you can ask your question directly. Another question, how long does it take for a rain garden to fill in and look green and lush?
A lot of that depends on the size of plants that you use when you first install it, whether they're the smaller plug size variety where they're in small 2-inch containers, or quarts, or larger like gallon size pots. Native plants, one of the sayings that go along with native plants is it takes about 3 years before they really kind of hit their stride. So the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, and the third year they leap. So it does take a few years, generally speaking, for things to really kind of come into their own and mature.
Great, thanks. And I think we've kind of covered this, but can the Watershed Council help select the correct location for a new rain garden?
Yes. We can definitely try to help assess, you know, whether through photos or a site visit, if it's something that you have, you know, decided you want to pursue and you aren't quite comfortable maybe making the call on whether or not it's the right spot. Somebody from the Watershed Council staff can go out and take a look and help you walk through that process.
Great. Are there plants that can handle sun all day long if it looks like the right spot to collect runoff?
Yes, absolutely. There are plenty of plant species. In fact, I would say that the majority of them that are best suited for rain gardens are also full sun loving plants. So again, it kind of, there our publications feature some of them. I can also, you know, if you want to reach out to me at any point in time and talk about plant options for rain gardens, you know, I'm available to do that. If any callers or somebody want to email me, I can do that at some point.
Great. So at this point in time, we have no more questions. I'll do a last call if any. Oh, okay, perfect. I take that back. We do have someone that has raised their hand. So Eric, you're now unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, thanks, Jennifer. This is Eric Keller. I'm with U.S. Senator Gary Peters' office. So I just really wanted to thank, Jennifer for such an informative presentation. Really, there's so much that the Watershed Center does. So I just wanted to take a quick minute and provide a statement to that effect. I definitely applaud Gail, the board of directors, legislators, volunteers, members, and staff for your tireless efforts to protect Northern Michigan water. I grew up in Northern Michigan, and now I have a privilege of acting as Senator Peters' liaison in Northern Michigan. And one thing, growing up and living here that I definitely understand is that water literally defines us here, and it also connects us. And, Senator Peters also understands that our Great Lakes, our tributaries, and water bodies are all connected. And he knows that besides our people, water is our most valuable resource. And, that's why Gary's so committed to working with the Watershed Council to bring all federal resources possible to bear to support your work. Whether that's infrastructure related or expanding and increasing GRI to ensuring research continues on harmful algal blooms and federal support to assist communities dealing with record high water levels and erosion, to cleaning up PFAS contamination and holding actors accountable and pushing for transparency in pipeline and dam safety, to literally supporting nonprofits like you through the COVID crisis. All of these things are issues that the senator works on every day, and they're also the same things that all of you work on every single day. And so without your countless efforts and the status of our water here in Northern Michigan wouldn't be where it is today. So I just want to really thank you and let you know that we're all in this together, and that's why Senator Peters thanks you for over 40 years of efforts, and looks forward to working with you in the days, months, and years to come.
Thank you, Eric. We greatly appreciate that. And we greatly appreciate all of the efforts that the Senator has done to help the Watershed Council. We're a recipient of GLRI funds. And I know we've been, an ally with the Senator, and we thank him for all of his work to help protect our waters. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that.
We do have another question. What are the long-range plans of the Watershed Council for planning and developing community rain gardens?
That's a good question. We actually are working with the 3 cities on Lake Charlevoix, East Jordan, Boyne City, and Charlevoix right now to develop some green infrastructure conceptual planning for each of those communities, and we're working closely with city staff. So that's a great way to go about doing the long-range planning for what those communities may need for green infrastructure to help protect the water quality of Lake Charlevoix. We're also doing a couple smaller projects similar in scope within the Little Traverse Bay watershed and in the city of Sheboygan. It's certainly something that we can plan to continue to do and bring expertise from other engineering groups who practice green infrastructure development. So, one step at a time, but we're making a lot of headway, and we're thankful for the support of our communities.
Wonderful, thank you, Jen. Last call for any questions. Again, you can put them in the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen, or feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute you. Otherwise, I think, Jen, you have done a fantastic job answering all of the questions that came in. So thank you very much. And I will pass it back to you to go ahead and continue.
Right. Thank you, Jennifer, for facilitating that. I just want to say a couple more things before we introduce our video. So I hope you can all stay with us for a few more minutes to watch the debut of our new Green Infrastructure Rain Gardens video that we prepared for you today. If you have any difficulties viewing the video due to your internet connection, please visit our website to watch the video at a later date. It can be found on our website at www.watershedcouncil.org rain gardens. If you have any difficulties finding it on our website, please call or email us and we'll help direct you to that video. So now please sit back and enjoy our new rain garden video.
Hi, I'm Jen Buchanan, Watershed Protection Director at Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council. Thanks for tuning in and your interest in rain gardens. Today, I'm at the Greenway Rain Garden here in Petoskey. This project serves as a great example of what makes a rain garden both beautiful and functional. One of my favorite things about this rain garden is what we replaced. Before, this was all parking area, so hardscape, where runoff could not infiltrate into the ground. In partnership with the city, we found a better use for this space, this rain garden. So now, water that normally or otherwise would have run off into the bay is now absorbed into the ground at this location. As you can see, this location has sidewalks and streets and buildings nearby. So its urban location serves as a great example to neighbors about what they too can do on their properties to help protect water quality by installing a rain garden. Runoff from this nearby parking lot enters into the rain garden through this cobble area where debris and sediment filters out. The remaining runoff enters into the basin before absorbing into the ground. In heavy events, the basin might fill up but doesn't overtop its banks. As you can see, this rain garden has a lot of surface area and volume, but in a really heavy event, if the water doesn't absorb into the ground quickly, it'll flow into this drain, which then enters into the city's storm sewer. The key to all good rain gardens are the plants, and the best plants for rain gardens are deep-rooting native plants. This garden features over a dozen different Michigan native plants, from ground covers and bunch grasses to shrubs and perennials. Deep-rooting plants help absorb the water into the ground, removing a lot of the pollutants, including the nutrients, which then they use to help grow. This is one of my personal favorites, blue-eyed grass. It stays short and looks great all year round. Does well in all kinds of conditions and is very adaptable. As you can see, it blooms during the day, and at night it closes up. This is Joe Pieweed, one of the best workhorses for any rain garden. It has very deep roots, but also grows quite tall. It's best suited for the lowermost parts of any rain garden where most of the water will be concentrated. Here are a couple more of my favorite plants I like to use in rain gardens. This is nodding wild onion. You can see it's starting to form some flower heads, which will open up later in the summer and reveal a white flower. I like to use these in areas where it's a little drier. It also makes a really great ground cover. Over time, this will fill in like a blanket of nodding wild onion. Over here, this is a little blue stem. It's a bunch grass. It'll get taller, about 3 feet, maybe a little taller. In the fall, the foliage will turn more of a burgundy color, form a seed head at the top. I like to use it as well in drier areas, and it's great for stabilizing slopes. This is beard tongue, or penstemon. The purplish color doesn't occur naturally. This is a cultivar of the native species. It is very adaptable to many different soil types. You can see the purple color in this rain garden adds nice contrast to the other plants. This is blue flag iris. It likes to be in the bottom areas of a rain garden where it's going to have more moist soils. This one happens to be blooming right now, and in time, more of these will spread and the base of the rain garden will be filled with iris. This is purple coneflower, popular garden flower. It's a purple flower later in the summer. I like to use them in the higher, drier areas of rain gardens where their showy flowers are long-lasting through the late summer. This is prairie dock. It has large, rough leaves. These plant specimens are still pretty young. In a couple years, they'll get much larger. They're one of my favorite plants to use. They're quite tolerant of many soil types, but their stature really makes an impression in any rain garden.
Hello, my name is Amy Tweeten, and I work for the City of Petoskey as the city planner. This rain garden was installed fall of 2018, I believe, so it's going on its second full year. It was part of the rain garden project through Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council. The reason it's located here is because I'm on a slope on Jennings Avenue, so it's actually capturing, in a heavy rain, the stormwater that comes down the curb, enters our driveway, and it hits these rocks and it goes into, and this area actually does fill with water on a heavy rain. And you can see how it's settling out sand that has come from the stormwater. So that's what I like about it, is that it's capturing rainwater, and it is also attracting bugs and pollinators, and creating more diversity than just a plain old green lawn.
Hi, I'm Rick Newman. I'm an architect here in Petoskey, and when I heard about the Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council's Rain Garden Grant Program, I decided I had to apply, as I was in the process of building a new house at the time. And fortunately, I was awarded a grant. And this basin here at the top is the first segment that was built by Chris Leifson of Wildflowers. Being that this house was being built on a hillside that slopes both to the south and to the west, I knew it was going to be important to try to keep stormwater on the lot and try to prevent erosion. So I really don't like gutters and downspouts, and so all the roof water drains into these basins, and all the driveway stormwater also drains into this upper basin, which when it fills up overflows into the next basin, which when it fills up overflows into the third basin. And all water, at least to date, with the storms we've had so far, have been captured on site with no runoff down the hill.
Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you learned a little bit more about rain gardens, and maybe you'll be inspired to plant one in your own yard. If you need a little more inspiration, be sure to check out this rain garden on the Petoskey Greenway on the corner of State and Petoskey. And if you need more information, be sure to check out the Watershed Council's website. We have a lot of information to help you out on how to build and construct your own rain garden.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the video, and that concludes today's meeting. On behalf of Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council staff and our board of directors, we thank you so much for attending the Watershed Council's 41st annual meeting. We appreciate your attendance and your ongoing support of our important work. As always, if the Watershed Council can be of any assistance, please feel free to contact us. We look forward to seeing you again in person, and in the meantime, be safe, stay healthy, and stay in touch. Thanks again.